We look at some more prospect head-to-heads, but before, what is going on in SKA with Matvei Michkov and Ivan Demidov? All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. During the summertime, though, it's 3 times a week. I'm Hadi and joined by Sebastian. We're co-hosts here over at Locked On NHL Prospects, and we got a loaded episode for you today. We're going to start off by discussing kind of what's going on in SKA right now. We've got Matvei Michkov who's scratched, Ivan Demidov playing as a 13th forward, how that plays into their kind of progression and how pressing it is for them to get out of SK as soon as possible. And then we've got 2 head-to-heads for you today. We're first going to be looking at Luke Hughes and Olen Zellweger, and then in our third and final segment, we'll look at the big one. We've got Simon Nemec and David Jiricek going head-to-head. We're going to be comparing the two, how they project, what we can expect from them this season. So make sure to tune in for the whole thing. Before I get into it, I just want to let you know our sponsor for today's episode is Bird Dogs. So Bird Dogs is a great provider of very comfortable khakis. They've got great accessories, hats, water bottles, all that good stuff. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnhl or enter promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout for a free water bottle with any order. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Before we get into the episode itself, just remember to like and subscribe. If you like what you're watching, leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about. If you have any questions, like we said in the last episode, we review all our questions and select the good ones and keep them for the episode. So make sure to leave us a comment. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So let's start off with a bit of a weird one. I don't understand why Russian teams just are so hesitant to be playing their young players. We've got Matvei Michkov right now in SKA in the KHL, who's a healthy scratch. Ivan Demidov is playing as a 13th forward, averaging about 3 minutes a night. You know, it's so difficult to look at these situations and then be willing to run to the stage as an NHL scout to draft a really good Russian like Michkov, like Demidov. That definitely affects their projections. I mean, is this a willful and intentional thing from Russian teams, knowing that they're going to have a better shot of retaining their talent if they don't draft them right away? Or what's your take on this?
I don't know what the answer to that question is. I think everyone's been racking their brains to answer it. On the plus side, Ivan Demidov is up to playing third line minutes today, so progress, I guess. Like the top 9 minutes is something. But Michkov is still scratched today for SKA. And I think that both those players are of the caliber to be highly impactful KHLers as of right now. And Michkov proved that last year, and Demidov is proving it at every level he's been allowed to show it at so far. And I think that there's like a hyper focus on trust and trust being earned, and that young players need to earn trust in order to earn opportunities, that all of these things are things that have to be worked on and shown and proven repeatedly in order to gain that trust. And on the one hand, you can understand coaches wanting to obviously trust their players. Like this is a competitive league. The KHL is a league where teams want desperately to win. On the other hand, these are both players that, at least in my view, and in the view of a lot of scouts and fans alike, that both Demidov and Michkov are players of the caliber that could make massive differences in SKA's lineup. Like, very few players can match the raw skill of these two guys. And SKA is a team that currently has Alex Galchenyuk playing. They're playing at 1C, and as much as I've enjoyed watching Galchenyuk play in the NHL in various teams and various situations, and I remember his 30-goal season with the Habs quite fondly. I was there when he scored his 30th goal that year. But Michkov is a player of tremendous skill who can outshine Galchenyuk in many ways in terms of skill and offensive capabilities and dynamism and creativity already. And I think that it is a curious phenomenon, and that it is not helping these players develop. And of course, I can understand why teams are hesitant to spend big draft picks on players like these, where they don't have much control over their development.
Yep.
And at the same time, if I'm taking a bet on a player with chaotic development, it's probably going to be Matvei Michkov of all guys, right? Like, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty with this development. All of this stress about playing time and things are things that we knew was going to happen, right? And is why he fell in the draft, right? Like, this has been known for quite a while.
Yeah.
At the same time, he's going to get playing minutes somehow at some point, whether he's getting loaned out again, or what if his contract gets dissolved early, or who knows. He's going to have to get minutes in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating how it's currently going. But if I'm a Flyers fan, like, yes, it's annoying. It sucks. But I wouldn't be too concerned on it drastically affecting Michkov's projection, at least as of right now, right? Like, we are just starting the season, right? Like, it's going to be a long year, and it's going to be another 2 full years, likely, until Michkov comes over. So there's still a lot to fall into place with his development. But yeah, how about you? What's your take on this entire situation? Because it's so strange.
It is very strange, but the thing is, the main concern I have is how it affects the player's playing style on the ice. We saw it a lot with Michkov in this draft year. His play with SKA just screamed urgency and impatience, and just everything he did, he was trying things that just no regular prospect who knows that they're going to be back on the ice in 2-3 minutes tops would ever try. Shots from the corner on every shift and that kind of stuff. Once he moved to Sochi and had that guarantee that he knew he was going to be back on the ice in a couple minutes because his team knew he was the best player on their team, you saw a much more comfortable, much more confident, much more poised, and more intelligent Matvei Michkov on the ice. We knew he had the capabilities. We knew he had the hockey sense, but he couldn't showcase it because he was trying to just put together a highlight reel with like 3 minutes a night playing as a 13th forward, which is an insanely difficult thing to do. And you essentially have to rush every play. You have to shoot everything on net. You have to just try to create every shift. And it led to things like him just skating through checks with his head down and, making life difficult for himself with the puck. But if this continues, I'd be very surprised if Michkov and his agent are in any way, shape, or form interested in staying with SKA, because he could have another situation like he had in Sochi if he's loaned out. I mean, he could be loaned out to a better team in a better division and have the same results that he had in Sochi. He's that good. So I'm just really curious to see first what we see from Michkov in terms of what he does on the ice in SKA. And if we see that same urgency and impatience, I don't think it's going to be long before he's loaned out again, because SKA has no interest in having a player on their team and on their ice, for even 3-4 minutes a night who's going to be doing what he did in SKA last year. It was really conducive to bad results. And at the same time, it's in the best interest of Michkov to get minutes in an organization that trusts him and knows what he's about. Which is very confusing as to why SKA doesn't do that, because he's proved it at every single other level than the KHL for them. He was one of the best players in the MHL as a 15-year-old. He was one of the best players in the VHL as a 16, 17-year-old. I mean, this is nothing new. Matvei Michkov is a known and proven elite talent. It's just very confusing. And now Ivan Demidov is kind of in the same boat, where he might get a couple games here and there as a third liner, could play as a 13th forward most nights, average maybe 6, 7, 8 minutes a night over the whole season. How does that affect his projection? How does that affect his confidence on the ice, his abilities, and especially what we see from him on a nightly basis? I'm quite concerned, because Ivan Demidov has the talent for sure to rival with Macklin Celebrini as a first overall pick. It's just if Celebrini's playing 20 minutes a night in the NCAA and averaging a point and a half per game, meanwhile Ivan Demidov's playing 6, 7, 8 minutes a night and averaging 0.2, 0.3 points a game. Because of that, I mean, they're in two completely different boats with two completely different approaches to their development. So it's just, that could affect Demidov's stock, and we could see another situation like Michkov's, where a very, very good player who can rival with the top 2, the top 3 ends up, outside of the top 5. So I'm curious to see how that goes down. But for me, it's just, I don't want a repeat of Michkov, and I think that Demidov and his agent should be scrambling to the GMs to find him another spot to play in as on a loan, because that worked wonders for Michkov's projection. I feel like if it wasn't for his stint in Sochi, Michkov would have been easily a like, bottom of the first round player, given what teams saw from him in the KHL with SKA. I feel like it wouldn't be a question at all. He probably would have slipped outside the top 20. So yeah, I just don't want that happening to Demidov, right? I mean, they're two fantastic players, but we'll see how that goes down. That's it for our discussion about that. We'll keep a close eye on both of them and see how their ice time improves, just to see how that works out. But we'll be heading into our two segments of head-to-heads. We'll start with Luke Hughes and Olen Zellweger. But before we get into it, Sebastian, talk me through today's sponsor.
Bird dogs make you look good. They make stretchy khaki pants and shorts that are designed to fit you slimmer through the thigh and leg to give you a truly sculpted look. And the biggest bonus is that they're super comfortable. They're made with this proprietary cloud knit fabric that ensures that all of the sweat is away from your body to keep you cool and dry all day long. They fit kind of similarly to Lululemon shorts, but they're a little bit more comfortable and more flexible to give you a bigger range of motion. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you.
All right, so moving on to our head-to-head segments. We're going to be talking first and foremost about Luke Hughes versus Olen Zellweger. Both are likely going to see some decent minutes at the NHL level this year. We're looking at guys who could very easily and very comfortably quarterback a power play. We're looking to see which player would produce more points, but also which player would be more impactful. And it's honestly fairly close. It'll be splitting hairs on our side, kind of breaking these two guys down. Luke Hughes obviously was a much higher draft pick. Was a top 5 draft pick in his draft year when he was drafted by the New Jersey Devils. A lot of people were concerned that this was kind of a PR move because his brother was on the team and all that stuff. But for me, Luke Hughes, in my rankings that year, was the second overall pick, right behind William Eklund, who I'm still a big fan of and still believe in very fondly. But for me, Luke Hughes was the best defenseman of his draft year. I wasn't as high on Owen Power as the private sphere was. I feel like a lot of NHL scouts were salivating at the combination of size and mobility and on-puck skill that Power had, and that ended up really working out well in their favor. Owen Power is a fantastic prospect, but for me, Luke Hughes still has the more offensive upside and has the more it factor of the two. I feel like Owen Power is always going to be kind of a step behind Rasmus Dahlin in terms of the impactfulness of his game overall, but Luke Hughes has a chance to become the cornerstone of that defensive core for New Jersey, at least offensively. His defense has improved slightly, but for me, Luke Hughes looks like one of the guys who you could say has the potential to be a point per game defenseman at the NHL level if he ends up seeing that top power play. Because right now it's Dougie Hamilton's to lose, right?
For sure. Yeah, like I think that Luke Hughes is just a special offensive talent too. I think point a game is maybe a little bit rich for my blood, but you've always been a really big fan of Hughes, and I respect you sticking to your guns on that one. But Olen Zellweger for me is another player who, similarly to Hughes, is a tremendously mobile. Like, he's an elite skater. He is a great puck mover. He is a true transitioning quarterback. Like, he finds solutions very, very effectively, always uses his mobility and his intelligence to create openings and create holes, and to and even to recognize when he has to circle back, and when his mobility can't solve a particular problem. He's very, very cerebral with how he approaches problem solving, which is something I really love in defensemen. And while I do think that Luke Hughes is going to get more opportunities than Zellweger this season, and will likely feature higher in terms of Calder voting and in terms of point production as a result, I think that both of these players are going to project as reasonably comparable value defensemen. Like, both of these players have the upside to be number one puck movers who quarterback a first power play extremely efficiently. I think that Zellweger is a bit more cerebral defensively than Hughes is, but he has he's not as physically capable as Luke Hughes is. So you have a bit of less reach, but I think his gap management's a lot stronger, and I think that his timing in terms of stick, overall, like his timing in terms of closing gaps and initiating that first defensive contact is just a lot stronger with Zellweger, and his stick work is more consistent. But Hughes, I think, has a bit more runway in terms of improving with his toolkit defensively, whereas Zellweger, I think, is already getting a bit closer to where he's going to cap out in terms of defensive effectiveness. But yeah, both these players are really fun to watch, extremely electrifying. And I really hope that both get extended NHL stints this season to really show what they're able to do in top 4 minutes.
Absolutely. The other caveat I'd add to that is that Luke Hughes is in a situation where he could very well see playoff time. And in the playoffs, if you're effective, coaches make adaptations. And, if Luke Hughes continues to be the high-end power play quarterback that he was in Michigan with the New Jersey Devils this year, it's not necessarily out of the question that we see him quarterbacking the first power play in the playoffs for the Devils, which is just, it's absurd to say about a player who hasn't really played that many NHL minutes yet. But having watched him last year in the playoffs, he just looks so ready for that role offensively. It's just like you said, the defensive game is very hit or miss with Luke Hughes, and it always has been. It's never been something that he's necessarily been particularly strong at. It's mainly because he's a very composed, very poised player, but to a fault, where sometimes he won't recognize the urgency of the situation, the urgency of needing to dump a puck. He tries to make every play a connected play. He tries to make every play a controlled play, by passing to a teammate, by stick handling around a player, and sometimes there's the urgency that you need to throw that puck up the boards. Like you've got 3 guys closing down on you, especially in the NHL with the lack of time you have. That's one thing Luke Hughes will need to adapt to. But if he does, watch out. At the same time, like I said, Zellweger is better defensively as we speak. I feel like Luke Hughes, if he starts to learn that level of urgency that he needs to develop in his game, he has the physical tools, he has the reach, he has the skating ability as well to recognize gaps and close them. I feel quicker than Zellweger would right now. So it's a matter of how you develop Hughes and what you kind of add to his game as he progresses, because the sky's the limit for you with Luke Hughes. And I still stand by the idea of him being a point per game NHL power play quarterback, because the skill set is absolutely there. I feel like he's got more offensive skill than Luke Hughes, than Quinn Hughes, even though Quinn Hughes is a lot more fluid and mobile and a lot more mature in terms of his overall game. It's more polished, it's more developed. I feel like Luke Hughes' raw skill could end up outshining Quinn Hughes long term, and Quinn Hughes agrees on that. He called Luke Hughes a better defenseman. So we'll see how that goes out and how that plays out. But I feel especially having Jack Hughes on his team could very well help him out in terms of finding someone on the power play who can get him secondary assists or get him primary assists as well, because Luke Hughes is a decent shooter as well. It'll be interesting to see how those two develop. But Olen Zellweger's situation for me is a bit more unclear than Hughes's. Hughes has a clear pathway to becoming the top defenseman on the New Jersey Devils. Dougie Hamilton's aging. There isn't really much else outside of Seamus Casey maybe who could rival with that position, but Casey's a righty and Luke Hughes is a lefty. So
Simon Nemec is probably another guy that fits that guy.
Yeah, definitely. And that's who we were going to be talking about in our next segment. But Nemec for me is just, again, he's another righty who could very well be a fantastic complement to Luke Hughes on the top pair. But for me, it's just Nemec, I don't feel would be a true top pair quarterback, especially in a one defenseman formation. Maybe we see a reverse to the 2 defenseman power plays, but I'd be very surprised. The 1-3-1s are working really well on the power play right now. So I'm quite confident in the fact that Luke Hughes has a very, very clear pathway to the top pair in the next year or two, if he continues to show what he's shown in Michigan. Whereas Zellweger has, he has some decent competition in terms of, you've got Jamie Drysdale, you've got a bunch of other defenseman prospects that they've added, Pavel Michkov, and a bunch of other prospects like that who have that power play quarterback ability. And on top of that, most of them are lefties. So it's about where he ends up playing in the lineup. I feel like Zellweger is the most offensively polished of all of them, probably has the most upside as well. But you look at a guy like Pavel Michkov, do you feel comfortable having a pairing of Zellweger and Michkov? Because for me, it's just too much chaos for any NHL defense pair.
It would be fun. I would adore it. Would I do it as a coach? Probably not. Would I do it as a fan or a scout? 100%. I would love to see it.
Absolutely. So that's the thing, is that I feel like if you want your coach to keep his hair, you don't do that, right? I mean, it's just not a thing that would be good for the scalp of any NHL coach. But it's just I can see the idea of Zellweger becoming that top pair defenseman, but it's a bit less clear, especially on a team that's nowhere near contending right now. They'll need a good 3, maybe 4 years before they're a proper top end contender. They have all the prospect pieces they ranked really highly in our prospect pool rankings, and it's just a matter of time before those prospects graduate and they start dropping down the prospect pool because of how good their NHL core is looking. But as we speak right now, we're looking at a very young core of players who need some time to adapt and develop and work around each other and develop chemistry. So I feel like Hughes' position is a tiny bit more concrete and clear on a contender, whereas Zellweger's position is already unclear. And on top of that, we're talking about a non-contending team. So we'll see how that goes. But like I said, it's still splitting hairs. I'm leaning Luke Hughes because I've always been a huge fan of his, and his position is clear. But Zellweger's very, very good, and Ducks fans should be very excited about this defenseman. But now we're going to be moving on to another Devils defenseman in Simon Nemec, going up against, for me, one of the best defensemen in the NHL in terms of prospects in David Jiricek. We'll get right into it coming up on this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects. All right, so moving on to our final segment, we're going to be looking at a big debate that really started early last year in last year's draft. Simon Nemec versus David Jiricek. This has been a raging discussion for the better part of a year and a half for now. I mean, we're looking at two players with different skill sets, but similar upsides, in my opinion. And it's just about what you prefer between the tools and the toolkit for me. David Jiricek is one of the most raw and toolsy players I've ever seen come out of an NHL draft. I mean, he's big, he's strong, he's skating solid, even though it's a bit wonky and off in terms of the stride itself. The output is really good because of his leg strength. On top of that, he's got a booming shot, great passing, good vision, great stick handling as well. His defensive game is polished. I mean, there's so much to love about the Columbus Blue Jackets right-handed defense prospect. And at the same time, you have Simon Nemec on the other side of the spectrum, who, for me, doesn't have the raw tools of David Jiricek by any means, but the mental game for him is so locked down. He plays such a mature game at such a young age. He's not raw. I wouldn't describe Simon Nemec as raw. He's one of the most fluid skaters among defensemen, right? I mean, you're looking at a guy whose skating stride is effortless. There's no wonkiness to it like you see with Jiricek. And on top of that, he reads plays just so extremely well. I know you prefer Jiricek by a decent margin. Yeah. I feel like there's more of a debate. What's the cutoff for you? What's the difference between the two for you mainly that makes Jiricek such a more solid and projectable prospect in your mind?
Well, I'm going to preface it with, I really, really like Simon Nemec. I think he's an awesome prospect, and I've always enjoyed watching him and scouting him play. Yeah. That said, I don't think that he's a player that I would have taken a shot on at second overall, even top 5 or top 7. I think you made some excellent points. This is a very intelligent defenseman. Simon Nemec is a very capable breakout artist. He understands pressure very, very well, knows how to diffuse it, always has a mental map of the ice of all of his options as outlets when he faces pressure. Mm-hmm. Awesome things to have. He also has a great shot, very heavy shot. He's a good distributor in the offensive zone, but he's more of that distributor rather than a creator or a playmaker, right? I think play goes through him, and he complements players around him very, very well. He's a line elevator. Like he makes people around him better, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. That said, I don't think that he has the game-breaking ability that David Jiricek has. David Jiricek, at his best, is a tremendous two-way defenseman who will hit you very, very hard in the defensive zone. You can clear the net front very effectively, is very cerebral in his timing of closing down gaps when he's on. There are some games where he just hasn't clicked in and it just isn't at the same caliber, which is, as you were saying, David Jiricek's a lot more raw than Nemec is. That said, the highs are so much higher with Jiricek, right? Like, I think that the defensive game is, as a whole, weaker than Nemec's, but I think that he has all the tools and the runway to not just match Nemec defensively, but maybe even surpass him. And I think in transition, he is more dynamic in the options he chooses. Like, Nemec has a mental map of the ice with all of his options, which also means that he often uses the simple options, right? Of like, it's the sensible, rational option to take, to diffuse pressure, slowly build up. David Jiricek, yes, he does use those simple outlets quite regularly, but he's always looking to make the big play, to find a play that makes a big difference. And he has been consistently learning to look for those plays rather than just shooting for the stars and making one and hoping it works. He's been a lot more cerebral with how he chooses to take those risks in the last year or so in the AHL. And I think offensively, he's a lot more dynamic than Nemec is. I think that Jiricek projects as a top pairing power play quarterback, whereas I think Nemec could be a second power play like distributor and facilitator, where you can slot him in there just fine and get the job done very, very competently. Whereas I think Jiricek is going to elevate a first power play, which is, for me, a completely different thing. And I think Jiricek's going to put up quite a few more points than Nemec will, depending on the situation. I think, especially in terms of primary point output, I think that Jiricek's going to be a lot higher than Nemec.
For sure.
And as a whole, I think, look, I'm always the type of scout that I like taking risks on players that I believe in and that I think can really, really hit hard in terms of pure upside. And Jiricek is just that. And one of my bigger regrets of my 2022 rankings was having him down at 6th overall. I'd have him at 2nd in a redraft already. It'd be Cooley, Jiricek, right, probably 1, 2, 3, same tier, but I'd probably have Jiricek at 2. And I'm a really huge fan of him. And in a redraft, I'd probably have Nemec closer to that 7 to 12 range, and he'd probably fall behind guys like Michkov and Hudson for me too.
I'd say for me, what really, if you look at the two, it's kind of a spectrum, right? You've got composure on one side and aggression on the other. And I feel like both would benefit from hitting that middle point. There's a runway for Nemec to add some aggression to his game, to become more of that that pace pushing defenseman, because he's got the skating ability and he's got the vision and creativity and raw ability in order to connect on those high danger plays and make them regularly. But like you said, Nemec is a very calm and very safe player. There's not much risk involved in his game. Jiricek is the complete opposite, where a lot of his plays are very risky, but he makes them work because of how talented he is. It's just, if Nemec can identify that he has the level of quality of playmaking and scoring ability that a David Jiricek has, it would drastically improve his game. I feel like you can work on a player's confidence and make him more confident by giving him the right environment. Jiricek, it's I feel like it's going to be a bit tougher to reel him in and show him that side of the game that's more poised and composed and calm, because for me, you look at a guy who's played like this his entire life and you're now telling him calm down. It's going to be a bit more difficult for me than to show Nemec hey, you can do this at the AHL, you can do this in Slovakia, you can do this at the World Juniors, you can do this at the NHL level. I feel like the discussion is a bit close. I still lean Jiricek. I still love Jiricek and what he brings to the game. And I feel like you said, between the two, I'd trust Jiricek more on a top power play, but I'd also trust Nemec more on the top penalty kill. That's how I see it. Oh,
without a doubt. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
Even though Nemec right now, as he stands, isn't as refined defensively as other prospects, I still feel like he has the intelligence, the smarts, the composure, the understanding of opposing structures, the 2 or 3 steps ahead type of thinking that other prospects lack. He has that and can incorporate that slowly into a penalty killing game that could be one of the best in the NHL. Whereas Jiricek will always be risky. I feel like that's just something you have to live with. A bit of the same as Michkov or Denton Matejchuk or Olen Zellweger or Luke Hughes. They'll always have that risk to them, even though they're different profiles of players. I feel like Jiricek is a lot more physical and a lot more aggressive defensively than a guy like Hughes, than a guy like Zellweger, than a guy like, those guys are more of the offensive defenseman type. And yes, Jiricek can play that role, but I see him more as an aggressive on both ways, an aggressive two-way defenseman in the purest form of, he's going to score you a lot of points. He's going to be aggressive defensively, but once you hit the defensive zone, he might run himself into trouble by just chasing after a check or that kind of thing. And I feel like that's something that's just a growing pain with Jiricek. I think that even at 30, 32, 33, that could still be a concern with him. Whereas with Nemec, I have no concern that at 30, 32, 33, he's holding down the fort defensively like no one else in the NHL. That's how I see them. And it's just a matter of what you value and what brings you the most joy. It's obviously going to be Jiricek in terms of the just pure fun factor, but
for sure.
what could potentially win you a cup, I feel like both are pretty tied in that element. And that's why we have them head to head, is because there's a very good discussion to have about these two. And it's a philosophical difference almost in terms of what you like in terms of defensemen, right?
For sure. Like, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think in terms of valuing Jiricek and Nemec and comparing them, I think most scouts have pretty similar reads on the two. It's all about how you view those reads and how you weigh those evaluations and those different skill sets, because they're very, very different players on the ice, and they have very different toolkits and capabilities and overall projections as defensemen. Even though both are going to be top 4 right shot defensemen, they're going to be fulfilling very, very different roles. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there with it being really a philosophical debate rather than like a scouting and evaluative debate at its core.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode. That'll be it for today's show. If you like what you've been watching, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment like we said at the start of the episode. We read all our comments and leave the best for the episodes. When you have some good questions, they always feature in our show. And if you've been listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your updates about the sporting world and what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next episode as we continue with some head-to-heads and talk about some other things. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.